Well, we are starting to approach the end of this interesting conference. Retired Major General Yaakov Amidror, the former National Security Advisor, will be our keynote speaker. The title of his speech is Missile Defense and Israeli Perspective. Amidror had a long and successful career in the Israeli Defense Force, mostly in military intelligence. His last post in the IDF was as commander of the National Defense Colleges. Please, Yaakov.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to speak. It's very rare after my last job. I now decompressing myself and try not to take too many responsibilities. The issue of missile defense is one of the main issues that Israel is dealing with relating to its security. There are other issues, but this is one of the most important ones. We understand that whatever will be the scenario in the next war or operation, we will have to deal with many missiles and rockets. And when I say missiles, it means rockets and missiles with all the differences between the two. And this is something that Israel should be prepared to deal with, whatever will be the scenario, either it will from Lebanon or from Gaza. There is a huge difference between the numbers. From Lebanon, it's 100,000 and even more rockets and missiles. From Gaza, it's 10-15% of this number. And of course, we don't forget the long-range missiles from Syria, which still exist after many of them were used domestically, and from Iran. So all in all, Israel is under the threat of around 150,000 rockets and missiles from many kinds. I'm not going back to the description of the Russians' capabilities. Some of them are in Syria. Some of them might come to the Hezbollah hands. Some of them are in Gaza. I'm not speaking about the numbers of the Shihabs and others from Iran. But these are the numbers, and we have to understand that this is a huge number to deal with, because if you speak about interceptors and so on and so forth, the ratio between the price of the missile and the price of the interceptors might be 10 times or 20 times more. But at the end of the day, what you calculate is not the ratio between the interceptor and the missile, but the damage of the missile and the interceptors, and this makes the economic understanding more easy to grasp. And Israel should be prepared for such an operation or a war in which it will have to deal with those numbers. And nothing will help us. It is now the next stage of war. We had the classical war in the past. We were, since 73, the chances that will happen again is very limited, but based on our capabilities, and we have to keep these capabilities. We had a long war of terrorism from Lebanon, from the West Bank, from Gaza, and we learned how to deal with it. And here we see kind of an, how to call it, joint venture between military capabilities and terror state of mind. Because almost all of the rockets and the missiles will be launched from civilian areas and will be launched into civilian areas. So in a way, it's not a military threat. Some of that will be used by NGOs. Hezbollah is not a state. Hamas is half a state, half not a state. So this is complicated, and we have to deal with it and to understand that whatever will be the circumstances, this is the threat that Israel should face and have to be prepared for in the future. It is not new for us. We had it in the first war in Gulf. We had it in the last operation in Gaza. We had it in 2006 from Lebanon. So it's not new. But the numbers now are so different from the numbers that we faced in the past that it is a new scenario, a new story, and we have to deal with it and to think how to deal with it in the future, because the quantity makes the difference here. We decided that we will approach this challenge with 3 different dimensions. One is how to prevent it from being implemented. The second is what we call, I don't like the names, but it's active defense. And the third one is passive defense. First of all, what we have to have in the future is a very good capability to identify and to kill the launchers before they are launching or immediately after they are launching. By the way, our experience from the 2006 war in Lebanon, operation in Lebanon, it was not a war, operation in Lebanon, is that probably none of the launchers succeeded to launch twice. Almost all of them had been killed or destroyed after the first launching, some of them even before the first launching. And Israel should build a system that, at least from Lebanon and Gaza, none of the launchers will launch twice, and as many of them will be destroyed before the first launching. It's a very complicated issue because of the range of the missiles, which is now from Scud C, it's some 100 kilometers, to the regular 107 millimeter, it is 10 kilometers. It means that we will have to cover the whole area of Lebanon, from Syria to the Galilee, to the border with Israel. And this challenge to cover vicently, I mean with vicent measures, in a way which will allow us to identify, to target, and to kill the launchers either before they had been used, will be used, or after the first attempt, is a huge challenge for the intelligence. It is the combination of the area in which it be located and the numbers that we are facing bring us to a situation in which it will be a huge challenge. And we are building a very sophisticated systems to identify, to locate, and to target those launchers. And during the whole scenario of the war, we will have to be in a situation to cover those areas day and night, to be the ability to gather the information in real time, to transmit it to centers in Israel in which we will have to make all the combinations which are needed to decide about priorities, and to have enough munition which is precise enough to kill those launchers. This is a huge challenge. It's a very problematic system. Should be in a very real time, otherwise you lose the launchers. We have some photos from the war in which we can see the launcher launching and within 2 or 3 minutes going under any house or place that cannot be identified anymore. So it's a real time need, and the whole system of intelligence and targeting cannot be done on the ground. It should go to centers in Israel. Here we have to integrate all the pieces of information together to transmit it to the attacking forces and to have enough munition which is precise enough to kill the launchers. This is the first effort that we are investing a lot of money. We have a lot of experience. We have many lessons from those operations in the past. What we know that the next war will be much more complicated, and it's a huge channel to have this capability in the future because of the numbers and the huge area. This is the first. We understand that we cannot be in a situation in which all the killing of the launchers will be by precise munition from air or from land. And we are preparing our ground forces to a situation in which they will go into Lebanon, because the main problem is Lebanon, into Lebanon to gain control on areas that are the basis for launching the majority of the rockets and the missiles. We understand that far away from Israel, in the Bekaa, near Beirut, and many other areas, we cannot reach with ground forces. And that will be, till the end of the war, in the hands of the Air Force collections and targeting systems. But in the south of Lebanon, from which the vast majority of the missiles and the rockets will be launched, around 80%. We can reach those areas with ground forces. We prepare the ground forces to do the job, to gain control on the ground, and to prevent the launchers, the people, and the facilities to be used against Israel. It is, we know that it is not easy because of the terrain. We have an experience in the last operation in 2006. We provide those forces with some capabilities that we learn should be in their hands if we want them to gain control on the ground. They cannot be in any corner or every corner in Lebanon. They cannot go to every building in Lebanon. They cannot go to every settlement in Lebanon. But they have to gain control on the ground and to be in a situation to prevent those people who want to launch and those launchers which are located there to be used against Israel. I want to say something about that. As far as we understand the Hezbollah system, a majority of the launchers will be located on civilian areas. And the problem will be for the decision makers in the IDF and in the government very clear. We have the capability, we have the intelligence, we can kill them, destroy the launchers, but the price for the civilians in Lebanon will be very high. And the question will be, what should we do? Should we use this capability and kill many civilians in Lebanon, or not using our capabilities and have to face those missiles and rockets in Tel Aviv or in Haifa? That's the responsibility of the international community. All the details are known by the United Nations. We briefed the Secretary of the United Nations about those facts. This information is in the hands of the Red Cross. We briefed the Red Cross about the situation. It is known to every expert in the world, in the European Union. But the international community is doing nothing to prevent this situation. And in advance, we should say, in every situation, in every place that we can, loudly and clearly, in any war in Lebanon, the number of civilians which will be killed, not because we want it, but because they are in the places, in the areas from which Hezbollah intend to launch rockets and missiles into Israel. Many of them will be killed, not because we want it, but there is no any other way to prevent those missiles and rockets to be launched into Israel but by destroy them in the areas that they are located now. And in many of those areas, there is no any chance to do the job but by killing people who are living around it. It is true about Gaza, it is true even more so about Lebanon. And this is the time to call everyone from the international community. Get up, do something, otherwise you will be responsible for the death of so many civilians in Lebanon, because Israel will not have any other choice but to use this capability of targeting the launchers, and byproduct of that will be killing of many Lebanese. Again, not because we want it, because there is no any other way to do the job. So the combination of both collecting information, using precise munition to destroy the launchers, and to use the ground forces into those areas from which 80% of the launching will be done by Hezbollah. This is the way that we see the first element which will be used in the new situation that Israel is to face this threat of so many numbers of missiles and rockets. The other element is the active defense. I don't know if Israel is number one in active defense, but we are very much advanced in this area. We are going to build 3.5 layers of interceptors. The highest one will be the Arrow 3, which is now in the R&D process, and the last test was a very good one, and I hope that during the next year we will see other tests which will show us this it is going in the right way. There is half a layer which is the Arrow 2, then the David Sling. It will take another year or two to have this operational, and the Iron Dome, which now it's a question of numbers, not of principle. We have it, and we have to decide how many of them will be deployed around Israel. We have here some issues to make decisions upon. The Iron Dome is much better than those who were for this system in the past, when there are some argument. This system is doing much better than we anticipated. And because it is much cheaper than David Sling, the balance, the combination between the two is a question. How many interceptors we will have to have for the David Sling, how many for the Iron Dome, what will be the combination between them, and so on and so forth. But no question, because of what you just saw here, that we will have both of them operational within a few years. And the only question is the balance between them. When we will have all the three systems, and each of them was separate in the whole process of R&D. By the way, this is one of the best examples of cooperation between us and the Americans. The Arrow, from the beginning, the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3, is a joint venture between us and the Americans. David Sling is a joint venture between us and the Americans. Iron Dome is totally Israeli IP. We did it by ourselves. Now the Americans help us to finance more systems in the future. But the IP is totally Israeli. And as you know, and if you don't know, I want to say that yesterday we inaugurated the main laboratory simulator in the Israel air industry for the Arrow 3. We named it on Senator Inouye. He was one of the founders of this cooperation between the State of Israel and the United States of America at the beginning in the Arrow 2 and then the Arrow 3 and the David Sling. This is symbolize the cooperation that we have with the Americans in this area, and for us it's very important, not just technologically and not only because of the money, but also strategic alliance between Israel and America, and we share all the knowledge that we gain from those tests and in those both Arrow 2, 3 and David Sling with the Americans. and they are using it for their benefit. So this is a very good example of the cooperation between the two states, which is, by the way, in its peak in the last few years, much better than in any previous years in the past. Now we have to, assuming that all the 3.5 layers will work separately, we have to go to the next stage. And the next stage will be a system of a system. We will have to find a way how we control all the 3.5 systems and allocate the right interceptor to the right threat in the right time. It is not going to be easy. It is very complicated, but I believe that with our capabilities in technology, we can do it. And that will make the whole issue much easier and much cheaper. Because if we will be smart enough to allocate the right interceptor to the right threat in the right time, we can save a lot of money. And of course, we will have to learn all the threats, the new threats that might emerge from the new Russian systems, and some of them are Iranians and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we will have to have in Israel a system of a system which will cover the whole area of Israel, and I say something about it in some minutes, and will be smart enough to allocate the right interceptor to the right threat in the right time. And this is the next challenge that Israel is facing, assuming that both the Arrow 3 and the David Sling will be operational within some years. And we have some tests to do, and it is not easy, and we cannot be sure about it, but I believe that basically we are in the right way. This is the technological challenge that we are facing. But there is one which is conceptual challenge. And this is how to prioritize the allocation of the defense missile systems inside Israel. What is more important in a war? To defend the civilians in Tel Aviv or in Haifa? Or or to allocate our defense capabilities to military installations? Or to forces on the ground? Or to what? Because there is no way that everything will be defended at the same time everywhere. And you know, at the end of the day, the most problematic issue for the decision makers, it is not in the hands of the military, of course, for the decision makers in Jerusalem, is how to allocate these capabilities and to prioritize in a way which will allow us to continue the war, to win the war, and at the same time not to lose too many of our citizens. And this is going to be a huge problem. Because you have to explain to your citizens that, yes, we have the capability, that will not be going to defend you, it is going to defend them. And them might be some facilities, some areas which are strategically important, whatever. And this is a huge problem that we will face in the future, because if you have only 1 or 2 batteries, it's easy. If you have more and the attack is from Lebanon with more than 100,000 rockets and missiles, the problem of how to prioritize it is becoming a very strategic issue for someone in Jerusalem, not in Tel Aviv. Now, what is the third element? The first one was kind of offensive, how to kill the launchers in Lebanon or in Gaza or in Iran. The second one was active defense, intercepting the launchers, the rockets and the missiles. And the third one is the passive defense. Passive defense, we have 3 goals. We should have 3 goals. One is that every apartment in Israel will have a shelter. There is around 1 million Israelis who do not have shelters in their apartments. They have to go somewhere else, either in the same building or other places. For that, Israel should go to a huge project, which is change of the infrastructure in a way, to destroy old buildings and to build new ones with shelter in every apartment. There are some other benefits for the society and economically and so on and so forth, but from the security defense point of view, Israel should change part of its infrastructure so that within, I don't know, a few years, if it will take 5 or 10 years, every Israeli will have in his own apartment a shelter. First, is huge problem how to deal with the bureaucracy and so on and so forth, but I believe that that should be one of the leading efforts of the government in the few years ahead. The second one is to decide what facilities are sensitive enough that each of them will be defended independent without any connection, independently from the old systems. It might be something which is very important for the military. It might be something very important for the civilians. I don't know how many of them, it might be 10 or 100, to harden them to a situation in which even if all the systems collapse and nothing will defend them, they will be strong enough, defended enough to stand, even if it will be attacked directly by one of these missiles which had been mentioned. Surprisingly, we didn't make it in the past. And we begin to do it now. And we have to go with it on and on to decide where is the end of the list. Shouldn't be more than 100 points which will be defended separately in a way that even if very accurate missile or rocket reach the place, cannot be the facility cannot be destroyed. It is effort in a process now in Israel. And the third one, which is maybe the most important one, is to make the decisions and to build a new command and control system based on the fact that the IDF should be concentrate on winning the war against the enemy, and someone else has to be responsible for the homeland security. All the committees which went through the history of Israel to examine this issue recommended to take the responsibility from the hands of the Ministry of Defense and to move it to another ministry. That someone else, not those who are responsible to win the war against the enemy on the other side of the border, will be responsible for the homeland security of the State of Israel. One way or another, I don't know what will be the decision, but the decision that will be taken should be taken tomorrow morning and should be implemented immediately, because the situation now in which it is not clear who is responsible for what is very bad for the State of Israel. I believe that if the decision will be taken and will be implemented, we will be in much better situation to deal with these issues in the future. So here we have a combination of three elements. One is the offensive, the second one is the active defense, and the third one is the passive defense. In each of them there are elements which together build these capabilities. But because of the numbers and because of the quality of those missiles and rockets, and that each year many of them become more accurate, and so more problematic for the security of Israel and the ability of Israel to win a war against those threats, we will have to do all the three efforts in parallel. And the question is not if each of them is needed, but what is the balance between all the three together. Because they are at the end of the day, we will have to have all the three of them, and the decision and the very problematic decision is how much money to allocate to each one when you need the other capabilities as well. Thank you very much. Yes, if there are any questions, I'm more than open to questions. Yes, please. The lady, yes, please.
I would like to ask if there is any thinking also of using diplomacy. Sorry. I would like to ask if there's also thinking about using diplomacy as it's being done right now with the dismantling of the chemical weapon. And for example, there's the resolution 7001, which is relevant to this problem, but it's not effective because there is no an effective mechanism to dismantle militias like Hezbollah and so on. And as just to remind the lessons of Vinograd, we should also work on diplomacy or other strategic thinking beside the military.
We tried. We didn't find any way to convince Hezbollah, and I will be more than happy to hear ideas how someone can convince Hezbollah to get rid of these capabilities. We didn't find. We worked very hard, and we allocate a lot of hours to think about ways to convince Hezbollah. We didn't succeed. But if you have any ideas, I'll be more than happy to hear. By the way, if all those systems will not be used if Hezbollah will not launch missiles into Israel. It's only if Hezbollah will use this capability. Yes, please.
Thank you for a very elaborate and, in a way, classical presentation. But I wonder, you went into lengths, appreciative lengths, describing the tactics and the strategy of our containing the threat, the rocket war with Hezbollah. Now, I'm always missing here the point of linkage with the decision-making by Hezbollah to initiate it or not, or to counter the preventive measure, with the decision-makers in Tehran. So now I am not sure how to understand your approach, conceptually speaking, because assuming that there was, without going into details now, a miscalculation that made Tehran unhappy from the Lebanon war on the first hand. Now, assuming that the situation will change dramatically, so if you could describe in a more strategic, conceptual way, what would be the linkage between the Iranian threat or in self-defense or not, with the, as you elaborated, with our operation vis-à-vis Hezbollah? Thank you very much.
It's a very interesting question because the relations between Hezbollah and Iran are very complicated. On the one hand, this is an independent Lebanese organization with calculations related to what they think is the interest of the Shiites in Lebanon and the need kind of legitimacy and so on and so forth. At the same time, but exactly at the same time, with no any, kind of differentiation, this is an extension of Iran. Because you ask yourself, what for the hell is the interest of Nasrallah to send his people to fight in Syria, if it is not very much connected to the interest of Tehran? So here it is a very complicated situation. And my advice to us is not to connect our preparations, either it is in the area of offensive capabilities or defensive capabilities, both, to the strategic issue of Iran and how can we change the decisions of Nasrallah by going through Tehran. Mistake. When you have such capabilities as Hezbollah has today, you should prepare yourself how to contain it and to defend yourself from these capabilities. Of course, it will be better for us not to reach the point in which we will have to use it. But you cannot count on anything that you can, like the lady said something indirectly. We cannot build our capability or our defensive approach on the basis that we will succeed to convince someone in Tehran or in Hezbollah not to use this capability that they have. So it's two separate efforts that should be done. One is in the diplomatic side, and one is in the more military security side, and we have to build both of them to hope and to do whatever is needed to prevent it from happening, but to know that maybe we cannot make it. And then we will have to be, well, better prepared for the second scenario, in which we succeeded, we failed to prevent it diplomatically, and then we have to deal with it as it is on the ground. Yes, please.
Do you really believe that if the scenario that you say that thousands of missiles will be launched at the same time to Israel, as Iron Dome will prevent them? Maybe 1, 2, 3, 10, but not 100 missiles at the same time. It is not logic.
Why? Technically, you are wrong.
It not make sense.
Technically, you are wrong. But, of course, I don't believe that it should be only in the hands of the interceptors of the Iron Dome. It should be combined with the efforts to kill the launchers in Lebanon, and then to reduce the number of missiles that will be launched into Israel. I don't believe that only defensive measures can save Israel in this case. But technically, your answer, if you ask the question, the answer is yes. If 100 missiles will be launched into Israel at the same moment, the Iron Dome might kill, as in the past, 85% of them. 85%? Yes, this is the exact number is 84, by the way. Thousands of missiles at the same time, even Hezbollah cannot launch. The problem that you have to launch your interceptors, they have to launch their missiles. So thousands is not a number. And at the end, if 1,000 will be launched, we will have to prioritize our efforts and to say, okay, that will succeed, that will not. Yes, please.
Is there another way to run, instead of to run after the launchers, to make such an impact on Lebanon or Hezbollah, to hurt them in a way that they will stop? Instead of running...
What do you hint for? I don't understand. Deterrence is okay. Everything we just said is after deterrence failed.
After deterrence has failed and they start launching, is there a hit on special places?
Give me an example.
Like strategic places of them. They have also places that will stop them launching. That the hurt will be so hard for them, they won't be able to absorb it.
It's an interesting question, and I don't believe that there is a clear answer to that. First of all, the strategic areas in Lebanon, it's a Lebanese structure. It's not Hezbollah structure. So you have to decide here if you fight Lebanon and not only Hezbollah. And if you kill or destroy infrastructure of Lebanon, you come to another area internationally, and you have to ask yourself if it is wise or not. I prefer, for example, that every Sunni in Lebanon will sit in a coffee shop, will play sheshbesh, and will say to his friend, you see what the bad guys are getting from the Israelis? This is my preference, that we will differentiate the Shiites, and within the Shiites, the Hezbollah, from those who are not as bad as Hezbollah. So I'm not sure that it is wise regarding to the situation inside Lebanon, and I'm sure that it is not wise when you come to the international community to destroy Lebanon.
No, not Lebanon. I didn't say destroy Lebanon. I said to find the place of the Hezbollah.
Okay, Hezbollah is a target. This is not a question. We will do it. Mm-hmm. We will do it. Yes, please.
Thank you. What happens if Iran gets directly involved? We've seen how many long-range missiles they've got. I think many of us have seen YouTube pictures of those missiles impacting Tel Aviv because they're making those pictures. Does it become just a more complicated thing with many more missiles?
It is not much more missiles. It's some hundreds, with all due respect to the numbers that we have in Lebanon. This is not a game changer. It is much heavier missiles, but for that we build both, the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3, and the combination of both of them, when will be operational, I believe, can deal with the threat from Iran. At the end of the day, we have to, 10%, 20% of the missiles will reach Tel Aviv, and this is a kind of a war.
But you can't use active defense or counterforce against those missiles.
It's much more complicated. It is the border of Iran from Israel is 1,300 kilometers. There is a huge difference when you do it 130 kilometers or 1,300 kilometers. It's much more complicated, but this is because of that. The number of missiles is not the same, because you can produce for 1,500 kilometers.
And you have more time to intercept.
More time to intercept and more layers and so on. But anyhow, you can build 100, 400, 1,000 at the end. You cannot build 100,000 long-range missiles, even in Iran.
Okay.
כן, נכון. היא חיכתה כל היום רק לשאלה הזאת. Let her ask. Please.
Hello, my name is Tiara. I'm coming from Jordan. And
you're most welcome here.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand that it makes sense strategically to opportunize on the situation if Hezbollah were to launch against you, to attack their launchers. But I wonder, what about the value of life and choosing to, instead of attacking the launchers, which would kill the civilians, just attacking the missile or the rocket in air, maybe using just kinetics? Or why couldn't that be a consideration? I understand it would be more expensive and probably less strategically solvent, but what about the value of life?
Interesting question from a moral point of view. First of all, we cannot intercept all the missiles. Even if we have enough interceptors, we cannot intercept all the... Around between 15 and 20% of the missiles will reach Tel Aviv or Haifa or any other place. No way to intercept all of them technologically. The achievement of the Iron Dome is unpredictable, but it is not more than 84. And if we will make all the efforts that we are doing, it will be 85, 86. When you deal with 150,000 rockets, think about what does it mean. 10% is 15,000 rockets and missiles on Israeli citizens. So there is no way that we will count only on defensive, because we will have to reduce the number of launching capabilities on the other side to reach the point in which the 15% is not such a huge number. More than that. There is no way to build 150,000 interceptors. Economically, it's impossible for us and the Americans together. And the only way to build kind of a balance between the number of interceptors and the number of missiles and rockets is by reducing the number of missiles and rockets that will be launched from Lebanon into Israel. And that you can do only by destroying the launchers. So because of both elements, there is no way but to make the decision, the very hard decision, and no one in Israel is happy to make this decision, but this decision will be made, no question. If we have to ask ourselves to give the opportunity to the other side to launch it knowing that 15-20% of what will be launched will be in Tel Aviv or in Haifa, or to kill the launcher, and some Lebanese will be killed, no question what will be the answer. By the way, according to the national legal system, we have the international law, we have the right to do it. It's a legitimate military target. It's their criminal act to put it within civilian areas is a criminal action according to the international law. Not us defending ourselves by destroying the launchers. It's very clear. And if anyone has any influence on Hezbollah, this is the time to use it, to take it out of the, I'm not saying not using it, this is kind of a war, but not using it from within civilian crowded areas.
Okay.
Also, that is a limitation of
Thank you very much for this excellent
Before you all go, I just want to thank, I think we had a rich day of presentations. I think we tackled missile defense from every perspective possible, almost. Every possible perspective. I want to thank all of our speakers and presenters from near and from far away, and in particular, I want to thank Azriel Bermant, Research Associate in the Arms Control Program, for putting together this program that we all enjoyed today. Thank you very much.